to recap here, the drug didn't get any better. The cancer patients didn't get any better. You just got better at making money. You just refined your skills at price gouging. Shell is trying to fool people into thinking that it's addressing the climate crisis, when what it's actually doing is to continue to put money into fossil fuels. Mr. Diamond, you know how to spend $31 million a year in salary, and you can't figure out how to make up a $567 a month shortfall. This is a budget problem you cannot solve.
That is California Congresswoman Katie Porter, who has made her share of viral moments since she arrived on Capitol Hill 4 years ago. She's known for asking tough questions and is often seen grilling top executives of banks, big pharma, even top administration officials. She is now eyeing a new job, this one in the U.S. Senate. Porter is running to replace Senator Dianne Feinstein, who is not seeking re-election in 2024. Congresswoman Katie Porter joins us now. She has a new book out called I Swear Politics is Messier Than My Minivan. The book is really interesting because it's so blunt, and I want to talk about that in a moment. But there are so many headlines that we really should talk about as well these days, including that ruling from a Texas judge that we're still waiting to see what the appeal, whether or not it's going to happen, what it's going to look like. You're concerned about that, and you believe ultimately it will be reversed. Why do you think that?
I think that ultimately it will be appealed, certainly. I think that if it isn't reversed at the Supreme Court level, we in Congress will have to take some action. And we've already done that, introducing a bill. This was one of the quickest, I think, bills that we've ever put into place, had the most Democratic co-signers. I think Republicans are really misunderstanding this issue. It's about freedom. It's about the ability to make your own choice. And so I think that is a core value of both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. It's a core value of Americans to be able to make their own decision about when and if to start a family. And so if this gets appealed, if it doesn't get overturned by a court, then I think it's going to be on Congress to act, and I think we're going to have to do that.
Are you of the same mindset that some of your colleagues that if it stands, the FDA should ignore that ruling?
Well, I think this is always a challenging thing to think about. How do we build confidence in our government institutions, right? And so our Supreme Court and our court system generally is facing a crisis of public confidence. The things we heard about Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, of course, a lot of outrage about that, I think, understandably. And so I think the better solution here is for Congress to step up. I think people often forget that when the judiciary and the administrative branch are failing the American people, it's the legislative branch that is supposed to step up. We are the closest branch to the people, and so I think the best solution here would be able to get this passed through Congress quickly.
When it comes to Justice Clarence Thomas and, of course, what he's responding to, the lavish trips that he accepted from a Republican mega donor, do you think Congress, though, will actually get anything passed on that front, on the ethics front for Supreme Court justices? We
definitely need to get a judicial code of ethics passed for the Supreme Court. I think Congress has more work to do about its own ethics. For example, passing a congressional ban on stock trading. And we didn't get that over the finish line, even with Democrats in charge. And so I think one of the things that I try to talk about in the book is about the importance of us being willing to hold ourselves accountable, to look honestly at what people think about Congress, and then try to make it better, try to earn people's trust. Don't throw up our hands and say that it's the other party's fault, but instead dig into what we as Democrats need to do to earn the trust of the American people.
You're on the House Oversight Committee, and there has been some tension between the chairman of that committee, James Comer, and the ranking Democrat on that committee, Jamie Raskin, over Comer quietly issuing subpoenas. Do you feel, when it comes to the Republican-led investigation into documents, bank records, when it pertains to Hunter Biden, do you feel like you, as a member of that committee, have a good understanding of what the committee is investigating?
Well, I think that the hearing we've already seen on Hunter Biden's laptop, I called it a free-for-all hellscape, and it really was. The hearing itself lasted 6 hours, which is about a third of the time that the actual supposed story was suppressed. The New York Post story. So the story was allegedly suppressed about 18 hours, and our hearing investigating it lasted 6 hours. So I think this is not the right direction to be going. I do think it's important to have the ability to do subpoenas. I think there's a long tradition of those being bipartisan, and I would encourage Chairman Comer to continue to do that. He has done some very good bipartisan hearings early in his time in Congress, including on the border and on pandemic fraud. We're expecting to do an upcoming hearing on Big Pharma. And so I think he's shown an ability to do bipartisan work, he's also, unfortunately, sometimes I think gone the other direction and acted unilaterally. So I think there is a positive path there, and we just need to push Mr. Comer to lean into that style of working.
That's a really interesting comment. We have you here today. You've written this book. Obviously, you were in Congress, you're in the House now. You were running for a Senate seat to represent California. One thing that California has been in the headlines for recently is what's happening in San Francisco. Just yesterday, it was announced that Whole Foods is closing its flagship store there. They're concerned about worker safety because of the property crimes and what you've seen in that city as a whole. How do Democrats deal with that? If you're elected to the Senate, how will you personally deal with that?
Well, I think this needs to be a value that Democrats lean into, which is that everyone should be safe in their community. That includes business owners being able to open safely, workers safe, being able to go back and forth. And so I think we need to prioritize public safety. That means we need to think about what are the solutions that actually work, not just messaging bills, not things that are sound bites, which I think is where some of the Republican legislation is going, but what actually would create a more safe environment. And it's clear that we have work to do in many of California's cities. I live in Orange County. I live in Irvine. It's the safest large city of its size, like umpteenth years in a row. And so it's specific to our cities. It's specific to different strategies that they're using and different challenges that they're facing. And I think one of the things the federal government can do is provide a lot more resources for housing to address people experiencing homelessness. And I think provide some grants and incentives for cities to be more innovative around policing and safety.
Yeah, it's certainly a concern that a lot of people have. Let's talk about the book, because I was reading this and I, as someone who lived in Washington for 8.5 years, was kind of struck by how blunt it was, how honest it was. It's not always something you see from members of Congress, but you kind of talk about your experience coming to Capitol Hill, trying to kind of reform an institution that everyone hates, not just people on the left, not just people on the right. It's kind of, Congress does not have a good approval rating. How do you do that?
Well, I think part of it is be transparent with the American people. I think there's often a sort of, you see this in the political biographies, a lot of them that have been written, you see people kind of trying to put a gloss on the job. And I think instead we should be honest with the American people. This is why the job is hard. This is why we sometimes fall down on it. To love Congress, to love democracy means being willing to push it to do better. And we can't do that if we're not being honest about where it's falling short. So if we want to have a more representative government, then we need to design an institution that's modern, that will let us attract young people, women, parents. I'm the only single parent of young kids. And when I was elected in 2018, yet we have 10 million single parents in the United States. So I think we have to, if we love the institution, we have to be honest about it and not try to pretend that these problems aren't there. Look squarely at them, tackle them, and take them on.
And what does that look like? Because one of the things that I was struck by is you talk about being a single parent in Congress and how difficult it is. And because of that, the job is easier for people who are wealthy, people who are married. You say that someone kind of implied in there that a solution to your problem when you were struggling with scheduling was to get married.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, it would be easy. People have said to me, you can't do this job without a husband. And I'm like, what? I'm here. I'm doing this job. Like, and I'm really trying to do a really good job for California. And so I think we need to push back on those things. I think we need to modernize the institution. If it's not working for the American people, if they don't feel like they know what we do, what we're accomplishing, then we need to think about how to change that. And so part of the reason I've made use of those hearings and used the whiteboard in the hearings is to try to show the American people, this is what I'm asking, and this is the answer that I'm either getting or not getting sometimes in the case of a CEO or a Kelso administration official.
So if you go to the Senate, the whiteboard's coming with you?
The whiteboard's definitely coming with me. One of the great things about the Senate is you serve on twice as many committees. You could take on more issues. And we have a lot of special interests and a lot of folks in power who I think we need answers from. And so the Senate is a bigger opportunity to do that and more opportunities to work on the challenges facing this country.
Yeah, we should note you were running against Adam Schiff and Barbara Lee for that nomination. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. The book is very interesting. It's called I Swear My Life is Messier. The minivan,
yeah.
My minivan is messier than politics. Yeah. Very good to have you on, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that.
Caitlin, Congresswoman, they say if you want something done, ask a busy mom, right? I think you know a little. I think she knows a little something about that. I'm looking forward to reading it. Congrats on the book.